Level 1. The hold with no date on it. You're 23, 4 months into an 18-month parole violation at Red Hollow Correctional, and your file is clean. Not one write-up, not one incident. You keep a photo of Marisol folded small in your sock, not because you think you'll lose it, just because it feels safer against your skin than sitting on a shelf. You sit in the chow hall, a Tuesday. You're 2 bites into a tray of something orange and starchy when you hear a bench scrape back 3 tables over, then another. You catch the sound of a fist connecting with something that isn't a face, and you don't know what it actually was because by the time you hear the whistle, you're already face down on the floor with everyone in a 15-foot radius, wrists zip-tied. You throw nothing. You touch no one. It doesn't matter. You get a new address. 6 feet by 9 feet, a bunk bolted to the wall, a steel sink toilet combo, a slot in the door for trays. Pending review, you hear the officer say, like it's a phrase with an ending stapled to it somewhere. You ask how long. You watch him walk 3 cells down without answering. By day 5, you've built yourself a small routine to keep from losing track completely. A set of push-ups against the wall after each tray, counted under your breath. It feels like the only thing in the room you're actually choosing to do. You don't know a guard has logged it, agitated pacing, muttering, monitor, and you can't make a logbook entry care that you were only trying to keep your body from forgetting what moving felt like. Nobody down here owes you an explanation. Waiting isn't a stage for you, it's your whole assignment. Day 19, you get Carmen's first letter, already 3 questions behind where you actually are. Somewhere down the tier, you hear someone start crying, not shouting, crying, low and steady, for the better part of an hour, and you never find out who. Level 2. The one who teaches you the wall. You hear the crying stop sometime before your morning tray. 2 nights later, you hear something replace it. 2 knocks against the wall by your bunk, a pause, 2 more. You press your ear flat against the concrete to catch a voice low enough to nearly miss, and you learn in one long night a system someone spent years building. 2 taps, still breathing. 4, you good. Knock, knock, pause, knock, trouble, move if you can, flag someone if you can't. You found your first real exchange since the zip ties. You get it wrong once early. You pass clear down the line during a shakedown that isn't clear at all, and 2 cells past you, a man loses a week of yard time over it. He doesn't tap back to you for 4 straight days. You did that. You learn that trust here isn't something you earn once, you re-earn it nightly.
Still, for a stretch, it works for you. You've got something now that isn't quite company, but isn't nothing. You start thinking, you can actually do this. Then, a 5 a.m. shakedown catches you half a second slow getting to your knees, and half a second turns out to be enough for you. You watch a 4-man team come through your door in full gear. You feel a stretch, a mesh hood cinch down over your face, your own pulse louder than anything else in the room, that runs maybe 9 seconds and doesn't feel like 9 seconds at all to you. You get back up. You don't remember most of how. You don't find out until much later. That night's incident report becomes the anchor of a file that will follow you for the next 2 decades, and you will never once be handed a full copy of it. Level 3. The classification hearing. 91 days after the extraction, you hear 3 names get called for what staff refer to almost gently as a review. You hear yours among them. You sit in a room smaller than a classroom. 3 officers face you behind a folding table, a manila folder angled away from your eyes. Inside it, you find a photo of a tattoo on someone else's forearm that resembles yours closely enough for their purposes, and 1 sentence lifted from a letter Carmen sent you, misread as code for something it was never coded for. You're given only a confidential source for sourcing. You ask to see it. You don't get to. Under half an hour later, you're validated, the department's word, official, on paper, as an associate of a security threat group, not for anything you did, for a resemblance and a misread sentence. You're told there's one way off the list. They explain it bored, like they've said it too many times to count. Debrief, give up names, real or invented, for a shot at a lower security yard, and someday, maybe, parole consideration. Refuse, and you watch the validation hold indefinitely, which in here functions like a second sentence stacked quietly on top of your first one. Most of the names they want from you belong to men who did nothing at all. You say no. It costs you nothing anyone can measure, and everything you had left to give today. Walking in, you almost convince yourself this is routine, a form, a box checked, something you shake off by dinner. Day 111. You learn a classification code doesn't need a key to hold. It just needs someone to write it down and never revisit it. That night, you hear the tier run a pattern you haven't heard before. 4 long knocks, tier wide, one tier answering the next. You realize it's a welcome. You're one of them now. Carmen's next letter takes 5 months to reach you. Buried in the middle, you read, Marisol had a boy, Diego, 10 fingers, 10 toes, and, she writes, your exact stubborn chin. You read that line more times than you'd admit to anyone.
Level 4. The one who carries the notes. A few weeks later, you hear a new knock pattern start up down the tier. Slow, deliberate, someone still sounding out the alphabet of it. You recognize the rhythm. It used to be yours. You're not the one learning anymore. Somewhere in the last 2 years, without deciding to, you've become the one who runs kites. Notes folded flat as matchbook, passed cell to cell, timed against a guard's rounds you've clocked down to the minute. Every pass is a gamble you take, a write-up if you're lucky. You know a man 4 cells down only by his knock. You've never seen his face, and you feel him tap the trouble pattern 3 nights running. He wants a note reaching medical, asking for a real evaluation, not the 90-second wellness check they run through the slot. Passing it is real risk for you. Not passing it means you let a man ask, in the only shared language either of you has, not to be left alone with whatever's happening in his head. You pass it. It lands. 2 days later, you learn they actually pull him in. Some weeks, you find a note smaller than a playing card is the only proof you have that anyone down the row hasn't disappeared completely. Then, a shakedown catches contraband thread on your fingertips, and you feel an officer slam the tray slot shut on your hand hard enough that 2 knuckles never sit right again. Nobody logs how. What you don't know yet, that note is still the only thing that man will have for this decade of his life. By now, you've turned 2 voices on the tier into more than knock patterns. 4 years of exchanged raps through concrete, close enough to brothers for you. You know one as quick and restless, cracking jokes into the dark that land even through a wall. You know the other as slower, quieter, always talking about the lake near where he grew up and taking his granddaughter out there the day he's finally home. You don't have names yet. Those come later. That's usually how it works for you here. You learn a man completely on the day you're about to lose him. Level 5. The diagnosis. Your hand heals crooked. You stop noticing. 5 years in, day 1825, and you've picked up an expertise no resume will ever hold. You can name a guard by his boots alone, hold time to within the hour with 0 clocks, and you've come through 11 more shakedowns clean. You sit across from a psychologist doing court-mandated rounds, and you watch her listen without flinching while you describe the shapes gathering at the edge of the light after count. You hear her name it, SHU syndrome, decades of clinical research behind it by now. You learn the UN's own standard, sometimes called the Mandela Rules, after the South African leader who spent 27 years imprisoned and later called isolation among the worst of it, sets 15 days as the line into torture.
You're 1,810 days past that line by now. Nobody so much as glances up at you. Your knees have known this for years. The diagnosis is just the first time you hear anyone official agree with them. That same week, you hear the quicker voice, Tevin, finally a name to you, 29, from Gary, Indiana, tap out that his little sister has just gotten accepted into nursing school. You take in the first real good news either of you has had in longer than you can count. You let yourself sit in it for a minute. 2 mornings later, you notice his cell doesn't answer count. You watch an extraction team go in. You hear none of it directly, only the wrong kind of quiet after. You read medical event as the phrase that makes it into paperwork. You'll never know if that's the truth or just the version that closes a file fastest. You read Carmen's letter. Diego has lost his first tooth and wants to know, very seriously, if the tooth fairy has ever heard of a place like this. You write back that she visits twice as often in here, just to be fair. It's the only lie you don't feel bad about telling.
Level 6. The one who carries the notes. Part 2. The one they send for. 3 nights later, you hear Tevin's exact knot pattern turn up again, faint, from a cell that's supposed to be empty. You're not ready for the answer either way. 9 years now, day 3285. You're not just fluent in the code anymore. You're the one a guard will slide a note to, off the record. Check on the kid in 6, he's gone quiet. Somewhere in these years, you've turned into something like a counselor for a congregation you've never once seen face to face. You still know the man's whose note nearly cost you a hand 6 years back. You know he's still here, still struggling, but here. You let yourself count that. You lose the slower voice, Gerald, 56, 22 years into his sentence, always talking about that lake, to a stroke on an unremarkable Wednesday. You watch medical pull him off the tier, and he doesn't come back to it. You learn later his parole packet has been sitting signed, approved, on somebody's desk for 6 weeks already. You've never seen either man's face, and you'd still call them your people without hesitating. That night you hear the whole tier rap the same 4 beats together, unplanned, and you feel it hold for close to a full minute. You learn grief travels through concrete just fine. You let yourself believe, briefly, that the ritual is the whole shape of it, that this is simply how your tier mourns and then keeps moving. Then you get Carmen's next letter, and you notice her handwriting leans in a direction it never used to, and you have no way to ask her why from in here, and she doesn't offer one on her own. Level 7. The transport. You have no time to sit with the handwriting. You get the call at 3:40 a.m. Roll up. No explanation attached. You get 9 minutes to compress a decade into 2 mesh bags. You live through what doesn't get talked about much outside these walls, though everyone inside knows its shape. You feel restraints run wrist to waist to ankle, cinched tight enough to leave marks that don't fade for a week. You spend the better part of 2 weeks cycling through processing units that all look identical to you. Same gray paint, same fluorescent hum, no officer willing to answer a single question. You get meals twice a day through a food port, a foil square that might be turkey, a piece of fruit gone soft at the edges. Nobody explains to you where you're headed or why the transfer starts in the first place. Somewhere around day 6, you feel the van break down on a stretch of highway with no shade in sight, and you feel the heat inside climb past what the restraints let anyone manage. You watch a man near the back stop answering when you officers call out for him. You watch it take them close to 20 minutes to get him unchained and into whatever air conditioning the front cab has. You can do exactly nothing, cuffed where you are. No kite to pass, no wall to knock on. You watch him come out of it. You never find out how close it actually was. Time doesn't move for you while you're in transit. It just piles up somewhere out of your view. 9 days in, you land somewhere that feels almost solid to you. A real cell, an actual number on the door. You let yourself think you've arrived. The next morning you hear roll up again, and this time it lands worse on you, because now you know exactly what those 2 words mean. What you don't know yet, 2 of Carmen's letters sit in a mailroom you'll never pass through, forwarded toward a facility you haven't reached, and she's running low on time to write you a 3rd. Day 5110 by your best guess, which by now is only ever a guess for you. You land somewhere long-term, Ashford State Penitentiary, a name you'll answer to for years. No mail has caught up to you yet. No word reaches you from anyone. Level 8, the one who signs off on people's futures. 4 years pass you the way a tide does. You only register it's gone once you look down. You take the first call that actually connects, and it isn't Carmen's voice, it's Diego's.
You hear him 19 now, and you barely recognize the shape of how he talks. You're not running kites in the dark anymore. You're a certified peer mentor inside Ashford's step-down unit, a title that would have sounded like a punchline to you a decade back. Staff ask your read on who's ready to move toward general population and who still needs eyes on them. Real outcomes move, in part, what you decide. You flag a 20-year-old everyone calls junior. Not ready, you tell them. Give him 3 more weeks. Staff transfer him anyway, within the week. 4 days later, you learn a fight on the new yard opens his face down to the bone over something that never would have touched him if he'd had the weeks you asked for. None of that weight shows up in your file. It shows up somewhere you never get to see, at a graveside you didn't know existed until years after the ground had already settled. You listen to Diego tell you Carmen died 4 years ago, sometime inside the 2 weeks you spent chained to a transport seat with no mail reaching you and no way to reach anyone back. Nobody could locate you in time. You missed the service. You weren't in the building, weren't in the state, didn't know what had happened until this exact call, years and 1,000 miles removed from the ground she's under. You hear Diego ask, quiet, did anybody even try to tell you? And your mouth opens, and you find nothing behind it, and you hear the automated voice cut in, 60 seconds remaining, before you find one word. You take his last collect call that day. Next time, he pays for it himself, and you still won't know what to say either time. You get a letter that same week from a legal aid office downstate. You read that attorneys are compiling a list of men held past the decade on validation status alone, building towards something bigger than any one of you could manage individually. You find your name already on it. Level 9, the testimony. Years of sworn statements later, you sit in a conference room with fluorescent light and not one bar in sight. It still lands strange against your skin. You learn a federal monitor oversees the case by now. A class action built on the same body of research behind the UN's 15-day standard. You hear about thousands of men across the state, still validated, still indefinite. You watch your file, misread tattoo photo and all, the one that starts with a logbook note about push-ups against a wall, become part of the official record. You hear a voice ask you to state your age for the transcript. Your mouth opens. Nothing arrives at first. 19 years since anyone has asked you a question that doesn't come shouted through a slot, and your voice has to relearn how to answer one that isn't. Then it comes back to you. You say the number, 42. You testify for 4 hours. You name Tevin, Gerald. You hold up the hand that still won't fully close. You describe the transport van on the shoulder of a highway with no shade. You describe Carmen's grave you've never once stood in front of. By the end, you notice nobody in the room is taking notes anymore. You watch them just listen, which after this many years feels to you like its own kind of verdict. For a moment, you feel something clean, vindication, whole. Then you hear the attorneys walk you through the fine print. Relief covers a defined class, moving forward from here, and your own file still carries flags from write-ups 2 decades old, including one for agitated muttering, logged when you were 23 and only trying to keep your body from forgetting what moving felt like. You learn whether you personally qualify is still, technically, under review. You find that relief reaching you only once most of the damage is already permanent, doesn't have a clean name. You've stopped looking for one. What you don't know yet, the word released, will take another 14 months to reach you, buried somewhere inside a court order longer than you'll ever read start to finish.
Level 10, the man relearning weather. It reaches you on an ordinary Tuesday, day 7030. 19 years, and you find the door opens on a plain weekday, same as it closed on one. Nothing prepares you for what weather actually does to you at this point. You feel wind against your face as an assault for the first several minutes. You find the sky too wide to look at head-on. You flinch at a shopping cart rattling past, at a dog barking somewhere down the block, at the plain fact of 100 strangers moving past you in every direction at once, none of them the least bit afraid, because none of them ever had to learn to be. You find Diego waiting at the gate, 23 now, an entire adult life folded into the way he's standing. You see he's not alone, a small girl balanced on his hip, maybe 2, with Carmen's exact laugh riding out of a face you've never once seen before this second. Nobody has to tell you her name before you feel her already reaching for you. Rain on a window still sounds to you, some nights, like the start of a knock pattern, before your ear catches up and tells you otherwise. You don't think that particular habit is going anywhere for you. 8 months later, you go back, not through intake, through the front door, a visitor's badge clipped to your shirt, part of the oversight team the settlement creates. You walk tears you used to only know by the sounds of them. You write letters twice a month to a 19-year-old inside who reminds you of Tevin at that age, funny in the dark, terrified just underneath it, and you teach him the code without ever once calling it that. Some nights, you still count push-ups against nothing, out of habit, before you catch yourself and stop. You don't know if that ever fully goes away for you. You've decided you don't need it to.